The growl ripped through the midnight air like a chainsaw through silence. VA Hospital. San Diego's emergency wing had seen its share of chaos over the years. Veterans screaming from night terrors. Code blues that turned peaceful corridors into battlegrounds against death. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared the night shift for what burst through those doors at 23:47 hours. "Get that dog under control!" Colonel Raymond Briggs's voice cracked across the bay, his face flushing crimson as he jabbed a finger toward the Belgian Malinois standing guard over the stretcher. "Someone shoot it if you have to!" Titan, the name etched into his tactical collar in bold white letters, stood like a wall of coiled muscle and bared teeth. 90 pounds of military-grade fury, his amber eyes tracking every movement in the room with the precision of a targeting system. Behind him, Chief Petty Officer Caleb Warren lay motionless on the gurney, his desert camouflage uniform darkened with spreading wetness that pooled beneath the thin mattress. The Black Hawk's rotors were still winding down on the helipad outside. Sergeant Hugo Reyes, the flight medic who'd ridden in with them, pressed his back against the wall, cradling a forearm that bore the perfect imprint of canine teeth. "The dog won't let anyone near him," Reyes gasped. "We tried 3 times in flight. He's in combat lock, protecting his handler." Dr. Chloe Bennett, the trauma resident on duty, clutched a bag of O-negative plasma with trembling hands. "Colonel, that SEAL has maybe 8 minutes before hypovolemic shock becomes irreversible. 8 minutes. The numbers like a death sentence. 8 minutes. 480 seconds. And between Caleb Warren and survival stood a dog that had been trained to kill. In the corner of the emergency bay, almost invisible in her gray janitor's uniform, Willow Harper stood motionless with her mop handle gripped in both hands. She was small, barely 5'4", with dark blonde hair pulled back in a functional ponytail, and not a trace of makeup on her weathered face. The kind of woman most people looked right through. The kind who cleaned up after emergencies, not participated in them. She watched the chaos unfold with eyes that held no fear. And for the briefest moment, so brief that no one noticed, Titan's relentless growling faltered. His massive head turned slightly, nostrils flaring, ears rotating toward the woman with the mop. Then the growl resumed, louder than before. Nurse Priscilla Morton, the head nurse who ran the night shift with an iron clipboard, swept past Willow with barely a glance. "You there, cleaning staff. This area is restricted during emergency procedures. Go mop somewhere else." Willow didn't argue. She never did. She simply took a single step backward, her mop moving in a slow arc across the linoleum, her eyes never leaving the dog. In the next 20 minutes, everything was going to change. The observation windows that lined the emergency bay had filled with faces, veterans in wheelchairs, insomniacs in hospital gowns, night staff from other departments drawn by the commotion. Through the reinforced glass, they watched like spectators at an arena, waiting to see how this would end. Colonel Briggs had spent 32 years in military medicine. He'd run field hospitals in 3 different combat zones. He'd made life and death decisions while mortar rounds shook the walls. But as he stared at the snarling Belgian Malinois, something cold settled in his chest. The unfamiliar sensation of being completely out of his depth. "Where's security?" he demanded. "On the way, sir." The answer came from a young nurse named Hannah Reed, who was doing her best to appear calm while keeping a trauma cart positioned between herself and the dog. "Someone tell me this animal's handler is going to wake up and call it off." Dr. Chloe Bennett shook her head. "Penetrating trauma to the right side. He's unconscious and deteriorating. If we don't get in there now—" "I can see that, doctor," Briggs snapped. "What I need is a solution, not a diagnosis." The doors burst open again, and Security Chief Derek Shaw strode in like a man who owned the building. He was big, 6'3", 240 pounds, the kind of physique that came from lifting weights while staring at himself in the mirror. His security uniform stretched tight across his shoulders, and the utility belt on his hips jangled with equipment he rarely had cause to use. "What have we got?" Shaw's eyes swept the room, cataloging threats the way he'd been trained during his 4 years as an MP before his honorable discharge. His gaze lingered on Willow for a moment, the small woman with the mop, standing too close to the action for a janitor. "Combat K9 and protective lock," Briggs explained tersely. "Won't let anyone near the patient. Shaw cracked his knuckles. Dogs! I've handled plenty of dogs. Big ones too. Let me try. He took 3 confident steps toward Titan. The Malinois didn't bark, didn't growl louder. He simply shifted his weight onto his hindquarters and lowered his head, and something in that posture made Shaw freeze mid-stride. This wasn't a family pet having a bad day. This was a weapon in standby mode, waiting for someone to cross an invisible line. Yeah, Shaw muttered, retreating. That's a military working dog, all right. We need the K9 unit from Camp Pendleton. Already called them, Hannah Reed reported. They're 20 minutes out. He doesn't have 20 minutes, Dr. Bennett's voice cracked with frustration. Someone do something. The sound of an electric motor drew attention to the doorway. A wheelchair rolled through, pushed by the veteran seated in it. A man in his 70s with a face like cracked leather and eyes that had seen things no one should have to see. Master Sergeant Silas Thompson, retired. Survivor of Ramadi, Fallujah, and Mosul. He'd been on the ward for 3 weeks, recovering from a surgery that was supposed to add a few more years to a body held together by titanium pins and pure stubbornness. What's all this racket? Thompson demanded, his voice still carrying the bark of a career NCO despite the cancer eating at his lungs. Some of us are trying to die in peace around here. Mr. Thompson, please stay back, Dr. Bennett urged. It's not safe. But Thompson wasn't looking at the dog. He was looking at Willow Harper, at the way she stood, weight evenly distributed, shoulders square, hands positioned on the mop handle like it was something else entirely, something she'd trained to hold. His eyes narrowed. Sir, we have a situation, Briggs began. I can see the situation, Colonel. Thompson wheeled himself closer to the glass partition, his gaze still tracking the janitor. Question is whether anyone in this room can actually do something about it. The radio on Shaw's belt crackled. Security Chief, this is Corporal Torres at the main entrance. K9 units ETA is now 25 minutes. Traffic accident on the I-5. Briggs's face went gray. 25 minutes. That SEAL will be dead in 25 minutes. Then we sedate the dog, Shaw said. With what? Standard tranquilizers take 15 minutes to work. In 15 minutes, that thing could kill half the people in this room. The conversation continued, voices rising and falling like waves, and through it all, Willow Harper kept mopping. Her strokes were slow, methodical, bringing her incrementally closer to the cordon of medical equipment that separated the staff from Titan's domain. Priscilla Morton noticed. I told you to leave, cleaning staff. This is a critical care situation, not a spectator sport. Willow paused. I think I can. Nobody asked what you think. Priscilla's voice dripped with the particular contempt that some people reserved for those they considered beneath them. You push a mop. You empty bedpans. You don't participate in medical emergencies. Are we clear? A few of the witnesses behind the glass exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Willow just nodded slowly and resumed mopping, her face betraying nothing. Derek Shaw, emboldened by Priscilla's dismissal, stepped closer to the janitor. Hey, little lady, maybe you should find somewhere else to be. We've got real professionals handling this. Yeah, Priscilla added, crossing her arms. Go clean the bathrooms in Ward C. I'm sure they need attention. Shaw put a hand on Willow's shoulder. Not quite a push, but not gentle either. Come on, out you go, before you get hurt. She looked up at him. Just looked. And for a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. Something that made Shaw's confident smile waver. But then it was gone, and she was just a small woman with a mop, stepping back obediently. Watch the floor, she said quietly. It's wet. Shaw snorted. Thanks for the safety tip, sweetheart. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss another military story like this one. We post new content every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, back to our janitor Willow, who's about to face something no one expected. The doors crashed open again, and this time, everyone turned. Sergeant Fletcher Kane walked in like a man who had already solved the problem. He wore the distinctive patch of the Camp Pendleton K9 unit on his shoulder, and his face carried the easy confidence of someone who'd spent 15 years working with military dogs. A catchpole dangled from his right hand. A tactical treat pouch hung from his belt. I'm here. Show me the animal. Colonel Briggs nearly sagged with relief. Sergeant, thank God. That Belgian Malinois has been in combat lock for 35 minutes. We can't reach the patient. Kane approached the invisible perimeter, studying Titan with professional interest. Beautiful specimen. Classic breeding lines. Probably runs about 90 pounds. I've handled hundreds of MWDs. Let me work. He pulled a treat from his pouch, held it where Titan could see it, and spoke in a clear, authoritative voice. Platz! Nothing. Aus! Platz! Titan's growl deepened, but he didn't move. Kane frowned. Standard German commands. Every military K9 is trained on them. He tried again, adding hand signals this time. Bleib! Sitz! Higher! Titan didn't even blink. He's not responding, Kane muttered, more to himself than anyone else. That's unusual. From her position near the wall, Willow watched. Her lips moved slightly, forming words no one could hear. Her eyes tracked not just the dog, but the specific way Kane held his body, the tone of his voice, the subtle errors in his pronunciation. Let me try the catch pole, Kane said, extending the loop toward Titan. The dog moved so fast he seemed to blur. One moment, Kane was reaching forward, confident in his equipment. The next, the catch pole had been torn from his hands, and Kane was stumbling backward, blood welling from a gash across his forearm, where Titan's teeth had grazed him. Medic! Kane shouted, cradling his arm. That dog is not right. Something's wrong with its training. Colonel Briggs grabbed Kane's shoulder. You're the expert. Figure it out. I'm telling you, sir, that animal isn't responding to any standard protocols. Someone trained it wrong, or it's been conditioned with non-standard commands, or... Kane shook his head. This is above my pay grade. We need the handlers from DevGru or Delta. They're the only ones who might know what's going on with this dog. DevGru is in Virginia, Briggs said through gritted teeth. That seal has 6 minutes. 5, Dr. Bennett corrected, her voice cracking. 5 minutes now. The observation windows were packed with witnesses now. Patients, staff, a few family members who'd been in the middle of late-night visits. Through their phones, the drama was being captured, recorded, uploaded. Somewhere in the digital ether, this moment was already spreading. Master Sergeant Thompson wheeled his chair closer to where Willow stood. His voice, when he spoke, was barely above a whisper. That dog knows something. Willow glanced at him. Sir, the way it's positioned, the way it's breathing, that's not random aggression. Thompson's roomy eyes were sharp with decades of hard-won wisdom. That dog is waiting for something, or someone. You should rest, sir. Your incision. Don't you sir me, young lady. I've been watching you since you walked in here. Thompson leaned forward in his wheelchair, his voice dropping even lower. You move like someone with training. You watch that dog like you understand what it's thinking. And the look in your eyes. He shook his head slowly. That's not the look of a janitor. Willow's expression didn't change, but her grip on the mop handle tightened, almost imperceptibly. I don't know what you mean, she said. Sure you don't. Thompson settled back in his chair. Sure you don't. Across the room, the argument about what to do next had reached a fever pitch. Kane was being treated for his arm wound. Briggs was screaming into a phone about liability and responsibility. Shaw was suggesting, with increasing volume, that they just shoot the dog. And through it all, Priscilla Morton stood like a general, surveying a battlefield, barking orders at nurses who were already doing everything they could. We need to tranquilize it, Shaw insisted, pulling his service weapon. I've got training. I can put a round right through its skull from here. You fire that weapon in my emergency room, and I'll have your badge, Briggs snapped. The liability of letting that seal die is worse. Everyone shut up! The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Dr. Chloe Bennett stood beside the monitoring equipment, her face pale but determined. 4 minutes. That's what we have. 4 minutes before brain death becomes inevitable. I don't care about protocols or training manuals or who's responsible for what. Someone in this room needs to figure out how to get past that dog, or I'm going to watch a decorated Navy SEAL die in front of me because a bunch of adults couldn't solve a problem. Silence fell. Even Titan seemed to pause, his head tilting slightly at the change in the room's energy. The cleaning lady said something earlier, someone muttered, about the commands. Priscilla's voice was sharp. The cleaning lady doesn't know anything about military dogs. Actually, the words came from Willow, soft but clear. She was looking at Kane, who was having his arm bandaged. You're using the wrong dialect. Every eye turned to her. Excuse me? Kane's voice dripped with condescension. I have 15 years of experience with military working dogs. I've handled hundreds of them. I've trained dozens. And you're going to tell me, a cleaning woman, that I'm using the wrong dialect? Willow met his gaze without flinching. Those are standard Schutzhund commands, German. But that dog, she nodded toward Titan. His responses, or lack of them, suggest he was trained in something else. Dutch-German hybrid, probably. The phrasing is different, the tonal inflection is different, and the handler commands would be completely different. The room went still. How would you know that? Briggs demanded. Willow didn't answer. She just turned back to her mopping. But Kane wasn't finished. His professional pride had been wounded, and he wasn't about to let a janitor question his expertise. Listen here, sweetheart. I don't know what YouTube videos you've been watching, but Dutch-German hybrid training? That's not even a real thing. Maybe in some theoretical academic paper somewhere, but in the field, military working dogs are trained in standardized programs with standardized commands. Period. Exactly, Priscilla added, her voice triumphant. Now, will someone please escort this woman out of here? She's disrupting the professionals. Shaw grabbed Willow's arm. All right, that's enough. Come on, take your hand off me. The words were quiet, but something in them made Shaw pause. Something in the way she stood, suddenly balanced, suddenly coiled, made him think twice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, he said, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. Chief Shaw? The voice came from Thompson's wheelchair. Let her go. With all due respect, Master Sergeant, I don't take orders from patients. No, you take orders from the VA, and last I checked, putting hands on staff members without cause was a terminable offense. Want to test that? Shaw hesitated. Then slowly he released Willow's arm. 3 minutes, Dr. Bennett announced, her voice hollow with despair. We have 3 minutes. Colonel Briggs looked around the room at the professionals who'd failed, at the equipment that couldn't help, at the dog that stood between them and a dying man. Then his eyes fell on his service pistol. Fine, he said, drawing the weapon. I'm sorry, boy, but that SEAL's life matters more than yours. He raised the pistol, aimed at Titan's massive head. Wait! The word came from Willow, but it wasn't a request. She stepped forward, past the medical equipment, past the invisible line that everyone else had been too afraid to cross. Her mop clattered to the floor behind her. What are you doing? Briggs demanded. Get back! She didn't stop. Titan's growl escalated. His lips peeled back, revealing teeth that had already drawn blood from 2 people tonight. His entire body tensed, preparing to launch. That dog will kill you, Kane shouted. But Willow kept walking, and then she opened her mouth and spoke. Ruhig! The word was barely a whisper, but it wasn't English, wasn't quite German either. It was something older, something rooted in dialects that had disappeared from formal military training decades ago. Titan's growl faltered. Vriend. Another word, another shift in the dog's posture. His ears, which had been pinned back, slowly rotated forward. Titan, herder protocol, Zevin. The change was instantaneous. Where moments ago a killing machine had stood ready to attack, now a different creature emerged. Titan's tail lowered. His head dropped. He stepped backward, away from Caleb Warren's stretcher, and assumed a position that anyone familiar with advanced K-9 training would recognize. Submission stance. Perfect, precise, complete submission. The silence in the emergency bay was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke. For 3 full seconds, the only sound was the beeping of Caleb Warren's heart monitor. Then Willow knelt beside Titan, her hand reaching out to rest on his head, and as she moved, her uniform shirt, old, worn thin from hundreds of washings, caught on the edge of a medical cart. It tore. The fabric ripped across her shoulder, exposing the skin beneath. And there, etched in black ink against her pale flesh, was a tattoo that made everyone who saw it freeze. A snarling wolf's head, surrounded by Roman numerals, 7. And beneath it, in Gothic letters that no longer existed in any official military database, Ghost Handler Unit. Commander Archer Davis had been on his way to the hospital anyway, following his wounded operator. He'd entered through a side door, meaning to avoid the chaos of the main entrance, meaning to get a status report before anyone realized he was there. He'd been standing in the back of the crowd for the last several minutes, watching everything unfold, and when he saw that tattoo, his reaction was immediate. His hand snapped to his forehead, a salute. Sharp, precise, military perfect. Wraith? His voice carried across the silent bay like a gunshot. Master Chief Petty Officer Willow Harper. Call sign Wraith? Willow didn't turn around. Her hand was still on Titan's head, her fingers gently scratching behind his ears. The dog, the weapon that had been ready to kill moments ago, was now leaning into her touch like a puppy. That was a long time ago, she said quietly. Ghost Unit 7. Davis stepped forward, his salute finally dropping. You trained every K-9 for DevGru from 2009 to 2019. You disappeared after Operation Crimson Kennel. We thought you were dead. Fletcher Kane's face had gone white. Ghost handlers are... Those files are classified above my clearance. I thought they were a myth. Not a myth. Davis's voice was reverent. The best handlers in SOCOM history. They trained dogs to do things that regular programs couldn't even imagine. And Wraith. He looked at the small woman kneeling beside Titan. She was the best of them. The best we ever had. Priscilla Morton's clipboard fell from her nerveless fingers. The janitor is... She's what? But there was no time for answers. Willow stood, her torn shirt exposing more of the tattoo, and turned to face Colonel Briggs. Now, she said, and her voice was different now. Commanding, absolute, the voice of someone who had given orders in places that would never appear on any map. You can save your seal. The medics burst into action. Dr. Bennett led the charge, her earlier despair transformed into focused determination. Within seconds, she had an IV line in Caleb Warren's arm. Blood products began flowing. Monitors beeped with renewed urgency as the team fought to pull a man back from the edge of death. And through it all, Titan stood perfectly still beside Willow Harper, his amber eyes watching his handler's rescue with something that looked almost like hope. We're about halfway through this incredible story, and things are about to get intense. If you're hooked like I am, smash that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more military K-9 stories like this. Drop a comment below telling me what you think happens next. Now, let's continue. The emergency bay had transformed into something else entirely. Where chaos had reigned minutes ago, now there was focused urgency. Medical personnel moved around Caleb Warren's gurney with practiced efficiency, calling out numbers and vital signs, pushing medications, preparing for emergency surgery. The life that had hung by a thread was being pulled back, stitch by stitch. But outside the immediate crisis, a different kind of transformation was taking place. Colonel Raymond Briggs stood frozen by the medication cabinet, his service pistol still in his hand, completely forgotten. His eyes kept darting between Willow Harper and the tattoo visible through her torn uniform. The same tattoo he'd seen in classified briefings about Special Operations medical support. The same unit designation he'd been told didn't officially exist. Ghost Handler Unit, he murmured, mostly to himself. That's impossible. I was told they were all, after that operation, after Crimson Kennel. Commander Davis had moved to stand beside Briggs, his voice low. The op that doesn't exist, the handlers who were never there. He nodded toward Willow. Except one of them is standing in your emergency room, mopping floors. Priscilla Morton had recovered her clipboard, but she held it against her chest like a shield. Her earlier contempt had curdled into something more complex. Embarrassment, disbelief, and a growing awareness of just how badly she'd misjudged the situation. All those times, she whispered, I told her to clean the toilets. I made her work double shifts on the isolation ward. She trailed off, unable to finish. Derek Shaw had retreated to the far corner of the room. His earlier swagger had evaporated, replaced by the hunched posture of a man trying to make himself smaller. The memory of grabbing Willow's arm, of calling her little lady and sweetheart, played on a humiliating loop in his mind. Fletcher Kane sat on an examination table, his bandaged arm cradled against his chest, watching Willow with the expression of a student who just discovered his entire education was incomplete. Dutch-German hybrid commands, he said to no one in particular. I've never even heard of that training methodology. I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never... He shook his head, unable to continue. In his wheelchair near the observation window, Master Sergeant Thompson allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He'd known there was something different about the janitor, recognized it the way veterans recognize each other, through stance, through awareness, through the particular way they move through a world that civilians would never fully understand. "Told you," he said to Dr. Bennett, who'd paused near him to catch her breath. She wasn't what she seemed. Dr. Bennett looked at the old soldier, then at the small woman standing beside the now calm Malinois. "Who is she, really?" "Someone who served," Thompson replied simply. "Same as the rest of us." Willow hadn't moved from Titan's side. Her hand remained on the dog's head, fingers absently scratching the spot behind his ears that he liked best. She was aware of the stares, the whispers, the cameras being raised behind the observation glass. She was aware that the life she'd built over the past 6 months, the anonymous existence of Willow Harper, night shift janitor, was crumbling around her. But her attention was focused on the gurney where Caleb Warren was being stabilized. "His pressure's coming up," one of the nurses reported. 92/60, still low, but rising. "Keep pushing fluids," Dr. Bennett ordered, "and get OR3 ready. He's going to need surgery for that wound." Willow watched the numbers on the monitor tick upward, watched the color slowly return to Caleb's face, watched the medics do their work with the same dedication she'd seen in field hospitals and forward operating bases across multiple combat zones. "He's going to make it." The voice came from Commander Davis, who'd approached without her noticing. Willow's tactical awareness had always been exceptional, but tonight, in this place, surrounded by ghosts of her past, she'd let her guard down. "I know," she said. "Titan bought him the time he needed. Titan bought him time because you told him to." Davis moved to stand beside her, looking down at the dog. "This is one of yours, isn't he?" Willow nodded slowly. "I trained him at the facility in Virginia Beach. He was part of the last batch, before—" She stopped, her jaw tightening. "Before Crimson Kennel." The words hung between them like something solid. "That operation doesn't exist," Willow said, her voice flat. "Officially." "No, it doesn't." Davis paused, choosing his words carefully. "But the handlers who died on it existed, and the dogs they lost existed, and the single survivor who walked out of that valley existed too." He turned to look at her directly. "I've been trying to find you for 3 years, Wraith. SOCOM has been trying to find you. And now you have. Now I have." He reached into his pocket and produced a challenge coin, bronze, heavy, engraved with symbols that would mean nothing to most people. "Ghost Unit 7, still active despite what the official records say. Still doing the work that needs doing." Willow looked at the coin, but didn't take it. "I'm not that person anymore, Commander." The woman who just talked down a combat-locked Malinois using commands that 99% of K9 handlers have never heard of? Davis raised an eyebrow. "That's exactly who you are, Master Chief. That's who you'll always be." Before Willow could respond, commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A gurney was being wheeled past. Caleb Warren, stabilized enough for transport, heading toward the surgical wing. As he passed, his eyes fluttered open briefly, Titan's entire body tensed. A low whine escaped his throat. "Easy, boy," Willow murmured. "Easy. He's going to be okay." Caleb's eyes found Titan, found the small woman standing beside him. Something flickered across his pain-glazed expression. Recognition, maybe, or gratitude, before unconsciousness pulled him under again. "That dog hasn't left his side for 8 months, Davis said quietly. 2 deployments together. They pulled each other out of a firefight in Syria. The bond between them. He shook his head. For Titan to submit to someone else, to trust someone else. You're the only person in the world he would have responded to. "Because I raised him," Willow said. "I trained him. I gave him his name." Her hand tightened briefly on Titan's head. "And then I let him go, the same way I let them all go, because that was my job." "Was your job?" Willow didn't answer. Instead, she reached down and gently unclipped the tactical collar from around Titan's neck. Her fingers traced the dog's name, then moved to a smaller marking beneath it, a serial number that matched the ink on her own forearm. "Sir?" A nurse approached Dr. Bennett. "OR3 is ready. We need to move now." The activity resumed. Caleb Warren's gurney disappeared through double doors. Medical staff scattered to their various duties. And gradually, the crowd behind the observation windows began to disperse, their phones still recording, their minds still processing what they had witnessed. But for those in the emergency bay, the night was far from over. Colonel Briggs had finally holstered his service pistol. He approached Willow with the careful steps of a man navigating a minefield, which, in many ways, he was. "Ms. Harper, Master Chief, He stopped, swallowed, tried again. "The things I said earlier, the order to shoot the dog, I didn't know. You didn't need to know." Willow's voice was calm, without accusation. "You had a dying man and a threat between you and him. You made decisions based on available information." She met his eyes. "That's what command is. That's gracious of you. No, it's accurate." She turned to face him fully, and for the first time, Briggs saw past the janitor's uniform to the soldier beneath. "What you do with this situation going forward, that's what matters. Not the mistakes you made when you didn't have all the facts." Briggs nodded slowly. "The hospital's staff, some of them weren't kind to you tonight. They weren't kind to a janitor, there's a difference." "Is there?" Willow's lips quirked slightly. Not quite a smile, but something adjacent to it. "Ask me again in a week, when I'm still here, still mopping floors, still invisible. See how kind they are then." Before Briggs could respond, Dr. Bennett approached with a tablet in her hands. "Master Chief Harper, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't been here, someone else would have figured it out." "No." Chloe shook her head firmly. "They wouldn't have. That dog was going to kill anyone who got close, and that seal was going to die because of it. You're the reason he's still alive." "Titan is the reason he's still alive," Willow corrected gently. "He protected his handler until help arrived. That's what he was trained to do." "By you?" Willow didn't deny it. She couldn't. Master Sergeant Thompson wheeled himself over, his face creased with emotion that veterans of his generation rarely showed. "Master Chief," he said, straightening as much as his worn body would allow, "I served in Ramadi in '04. My unit had a dog team attached for 3 months. One of your people, maybe, called himself Raven." Something flickered in Willow's eyes. "I knew Raven. He saved my life twice. Once from an IED the dog sniffed out. Once from an ambush they heard before any of us did." Thompson extended his weathered hand. "I never got to thank him properly, but I can thank you. For training people like him. For training dogs like that one." He nodded toward Titan. "For your service." Willow took his hand. "Thank you for yours, Master Sergeant." Around them, the emergency bay had mostly emptied. The cleaning that would normally fall to Willow was being handled by other staff members, none of whom seemed willing to let her pick up her mop again. Shaw had disappeared entirely. Priscilla was at the far end of the room, making phone calls with the urgent tone of someone who knew she'd have explaining to do. Kane was still sitting on the examination table, lost in thought. Only Commander Davis remained close, the challenge coin still in his hand. "The K9 program isn't the same without you," he said. "The handlers we have now, they're good, capable, but they don't have what you had, what you have." "What I had got 6 dogs killed," Willow said, and for the first time her voice cracked. "What I had got my entire team killed, what I had—" She stopped, her composure fracturing at the edges. Titan pressed closer to her, his warm bulk a silent comfort. "Crimson Kennel," Davis said. "I read what remained of the after-action reports, the parts that weren't classified into non-existence. You didn't kill your team, Master Chief. The mission killed them. The mission was my responsibility. The mission was compromised before your boots hit the ground. Intelligence failure at the highest levels. Assets that were supposed to be there weren't. Support that was supposed to arrive didn't." Davis's voice hardened. "You walked 27 miles through hostile territory with catastrophic injuries. You carried the only surviving dog on your back for the last 8 of those miles. And when you finally reached extraction, the first thing you asked was whether the mission objective had been achieved." Willow's eyes had grown distant, seeing something far away. "Scout died 3 weeks later. The injuries were too severe. But you brought him home. You brought the intel home. And the information you recovered saved over 200 lives in subsequent operations." Davis stepped closer. "Crimson Kennel wasn't your failure, Willow. It was your finest hour. Then why does it feel like this?" The words escaped before she could stop them. "Why does it feel like I'm drowning every single day?" The question hung in the air, raw and honest. Davis didn't have an answer. Perhaps there wasn't one. "SOCOM wants you back," he said finally. "But I'm not going to push. Not tonight. Not after everything." He pressed the challenge coin into her palm. "If you ever change your mind, if you ever feel ready, that coin will get you through any door that matters." Willow looked at the bronze disc, then closed her fingers around it. "I cleaned this hospital because of them," she said quietly. "Because of Thompson and veterans like him. Because they gave everything, and the least I can do is make sure their space is clean, that their rooms are tidy, that someone gives a damn about the small things." "That's a noble reason." "It's a selfish one," she corrected. "I do it because it helps me sleep at night. Because when I'm pushing a mop at 2 a.m., I'm not thinking about the valley. I'm not hearing the sounds. She exhaled slowly. "I'm just here, present, useful." Davis nodded, understanding in a way that only another soldier could. The doors to the surgical wing opened, and a nurse emerged. "Commander, Chief Petty Officer Warren is out of immediate danger. Surgery is proceeding well. He's expected to make a full recovery." The words washed over the room like a wave of relief. "Can the dog see him?" Willow asked. "When he wakes up?" The nurse looked uncertain. "That's not normally protocol. Titan has been with Warren for 8 months, 2 deployments. He's the reason that man survived long enough to reach this hospital." Willow's voice was soft but implacable. "He needs to see his handler." Davis cleared his throat. "I can make some calls. Ensure the proper authorizations are in place." The nurse nodded, still looking somewhat overwhelmed by the events of the night. As the medical staff began the work of returning the emergency bay to its normal state, Willow walked to where her mop had fallen. She picked it up, weighing it in her hands, the simple tool of an anonymous existence. "You don't have to do that," Dr. Bennett said. "Someone else can—" "This is my job." Willow began mopping, her strokes slow and methodical. "The floor is dirty. Someone needs to clean it." Titan lay down near the wall, his eyes tracking her movement. He seemed content now, at peace in a way he hadn't been since his handler had fallen. Perhaps it was because the crisis had passed. Perhaps it was because, for the first time in years, he was near someone who truly understood him. Or perhaps it was something simpler. Perhaps he recognized home when he found it. The hours that followed had a strange, dreamlike quality. News of what had happened in the emergency bay spread through the hospital like wildfire. Patients told nurses, nurses told doctors, doctors told administrators. And somewhere along the way, the story transformed from a simple account of events into something larger, something that seemed to grow with each retelling. The janitor who talked down a killer dog, the cleaning woman who turned out to be a military legend, the ghost who had been walking among them all along, mopping floors and emptying bedpans, invisible in plain sight. By 3 a.m., Willow had been approached by no fewer than 15 people. Some wanted to thank her. Others wanted to apologize for slights they suddenly remembered with painful clarity. A few just wanted to stare, as if they could somehow reconcile the small woman in the gray uniform with the classified operator who'd trained dogs to do things that regular handlers couldn't imagine. She responded to all of them the same way, with quiet patience, deflected attention, and a consistent insistence that she was simply doing her job. Priscilla Morton found her in Ward C, cleaning the floor outside the isolation rooms. "Ms. Harper?" Willow didn't look up. "The isolation ward always needs extra attention at night. Some of the patients can't control their—" "That's not why I'm here." Priscilla took a deep breath, visibly struggling with what she needed to say. "I've been the head nurse on the night shift for 11 years. In that time, I've learned to read people, to know who's competent and who isn't, who belongs in a medical setting and who's just passing through." The mop continued its rhythmic movements across the linoleum. "I was wrong about you." The words came out stilted, forced. "The way I treated you, the way I spoke to you tonight, it was unprofessional and unkind. Regardless of who you are or what you've done, you didn't deserve that." Willow paused her mopping. She looked at Priscilla, really looked, and saw a woman in her 50s who had spent decades building walls of professional authority because the alternative was vulnerability. She saw the cost of that armor in the lines around Priscilla's eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was bracing for a blow. "The toilet still needed cleaning," Willow said. "The bedpans still needed emptying. The floors still needed mopping. You weren't wrong about any of that. That's not the point. No? Willow resumed her work. Then what is the point, Nurse Morton? Priscilla opened her mouth, then closed it. She seemed lost, confronted with a response she hadn't expected. The point, Willow continued, is that this hospital runs because of people like you, people who maintain standards, people who ensure that the right things get done by the right people in the right way. You didn't know who I was because I didn't want you to know. That's not your failure, it's my choice. But if you had known, you would have treated me differently, and I didn't want to be treated differently. I wanted to mop floors. I wanted to be invisible. Willow paused again, meeting Priscilla's eyes. You gave me exactly what I asked for. Why would I hold that against you? Something shifted in Priscilla's expression. Not quite understanding, but something adjacent to it. You're a strange woman, Ms. Harper. I've been called worse. For a moment, something that might have been a smile ghosted across Priscilla's face. Then she straightened her uniform, restored her professional mask, and walked away. Willow watched her go, then looked down at Titan, who had followed her through the hospital like a silent shadow. What do you think, boy? Is she really that bad? Titan's tail thumped once against the floor. No growl, no warning. Just the simple contentment of a dog who'd found his way back to something familiar. Yeah, Willow murmured. That's what I thought too. The surgical waiting area was mostly empty when Willow arrived, Titan padding beside her on quiet paws. Commander Davis had made good on his promise. Somewhere between phone calls and authorizations, he'd arranged for the K-9 to be permitted in the recovery wing once Warren was out of surgery. But surgery wasn't finished yet, so Willow sat in one of the uncomfortable plastic chairs, her mop propped against the wall, and waited. Titan lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws. You're good at waiting, she said to him. You always were, even as a puppy. The other dogs would bark and jump and demand attention. But you just watched. You waited. You knew something was coming, and you were patient enough to let it arrive. The dog's ears twitched, tracking her voice. I should have come to see you. When you were assigned to Warren, when you deployed, I should have found a way. Her voice dropped lower. But I couldn't, because seeing you would have meant remembering them. And remembering them would have meant... She couldn't finish the sentence. Titan lifted his head and placed it on her knee, his amber eyes looking up at her with something that seemed almost like understanding. Scout, Ranger, Phantom, Ghost, Hunter, Shadow. The names fell from her lips like prayers. 6 dogs, 6 handlers. 1 mission. Her hand stroked Titan's fur with an automatic motion born of thousands of hours of training. And 1 survivor who had no business surviving. The waiting area was silent except for the soft hum of the hospital's ventilation system. Outside the windows, the San Diego night had begun its slow surrender to approaching dawn. The eastern sky was showing the first hints of gray. I was supposed to die with them, Willow said. That was the plan. We knew the mission was compromised going in. We just didn't know how badly. When everything fell apart, when the ambush hit, she closed her eyes. I watched them go down, one by one, dogs and handlers both, and I couldn't save them. I couldn't save any of them. Titan whined softly. Scout carried me the last miles. His back legs were shattered, and he still carried me. Because that's what I trained him to do. Because that's who he was. Tears tracked silently down her cheeks. And when we finally reached extraction, they wanted to give me a medal. A medal. As if anything could make up for what I'd lost. Footsteps approached. Willow quickly wiped her face, composing herself. Dr. Bennett appeared around the corner, surgical scrubs still bearing traces of the night's work. Master Chief? Chief Petty Officer Warren is out of surgery. He's going to be fine. Full recovery expected. Willow exhaled slowly. Can we see him? He's not awake yet, and probably won't be for several hours. But... Chloe hesitated. The nurses in recovery are all veterans of the emergency bay. They've heard what happened. They'd like to have Titan nearby when Warren wakes up. They think it would be good for him. It would be, Willow confirmed. The bond between a handler and his K-9, it's not something civilians fully understand. Titan's presence will do more for Warren's recovery than any medication. Chloe nodded. I'll make sure it happens. And, Master Chief, thank you for what you did tonight. For what you clearly do every day, even when no one notices. She walked away, leaving Willow alone with the dog. Titan's tail thumped against the floor again. "I know, boy," Willow murmured. "I know." The eastern windows were brightening steadily now, the first golden rays of dawn creeping across the waiting area. Willow's shift had technically ended 2 hours ago, but no one had mentioned it, and she hadn't left. She wasn't sure she could leave. The challenge coin that Davis had given her was still in her pocket, a small bronze weight that seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Ghost Unit 7. The unit that didn't exist. The handlers who had never been there. The dogs who had never served. And her. The survivor. The legend. The ghost. She turned the coin over in her fingers, feeling the raised symbols, the worn edges, the weight of everything it represented. "Sir," the voice came from behind her. She turned to find Corporal Ezra Collins, the MP, who'd been running database searches earlier in the night. He stood at attention, his young face uncertain. "At ease, Corporal." The command came automatically, muscle memory from another life. He relaxed slightly, though not entirely. "Ma'am, I wanted to apologize. Earlier tonight when I was searching the databases, I was trying to figure out who you were, what you were hiding." He swallowed. "I didn't know. None of us knew. You were doing your job. No apology necessary. Still," he hesitated. "The things that some people said to you tonight, the way Chief Shaw treated you, the way Nurse Morton—" He shook his head. "That wasn't right. It wouldn't have been right even if you were just a janitor." Willow regarded him for a long moment. "What's your MOS, Corporal?" 31 Bravo, ma'am, military police. "How long have you been in?" 4 years. "What do you want to do after? Career military? Something else?" Collins looked surprised by the question. I'm not sure, ma'am. I thought about going federal, FBI maybe, but the requirements—" "There's a K-9 unit in the Bureau," Willow said. "Not as well known as the military working dog program, but solid. Good handlers, good dogs." She paused. "If you're interested, I could put you in touch with some people." "You'd do that? For me?" "You kept looking when everyone else had already decided what they were seeing." Willow stood, brushing off her uniform. "That's a rare quality. It should be cultivated." Collins straightened to attention again, apparently unable to help himself. "Thank you, ma'am. I mean it. Thank you." She watched him walk away, young and uncertain and full of potential, and something that might have been hope flickered briefly in her chest. Then she looked down at Titan, who was watching her with knowing eyes. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "I'm not getting back in. I'm just making connections, being useful." Titan's tail thumped. "Oh, be quiet." The hospital was waking up around them now. Day shift staff were arriving, trading places with their night shift counterparts. The cafeteria was opening, the smell of coffee drifting through the corridors. Willow gathered her mop and her bucket and her cleaning supplies. Her shift was over. Her apartment, a small studio 3 blocks from the hospital, containing nothing personal except a single photograph she couldn't bear to look at, was waiting. But as she walked toward the exit, Titan still padding beside her, she passed the recovery wing. Through the window of one of the rooms, she could see Caleb Warren, still unconscious, machines monitoring his vital signs. "You should stay with him," she said to Titan. "He's going to need you when he wakes up." The dog whined. "I know, but this is where you belong, with him." She knelt, bringing herself to eye level with the Malinois. "You saved him tonight, boy. You kept him alive until help arrived. That's what you were trained to do. That's what you'll keep doing." She pressed her forehead to his. "Be good. Be brave. Protect your handler." Titan licked her face once, then turned and walked to the door of Warren's room. A nurse inside saw him, understood, and opened the door. Willow watched as the dog entered, circled 3 times at the foot of the bed, and lay down. His eyes never left his handler's face. "That's a good boy," she whispered. "That's my good boy." Then she turned and walked away, her mop over her shoulder, her uniform still torn, her identity still exposed. In her pocket, the challenge coin seemed to grow heavier with every step. The morning sun was warm on her face as she exited the hospital. The parking lot was filling with the day shift. Families were arriving for visiting hours. Life, in all its messy, complicated glory, was continuing. Willow paused on the sidewalk, closing her eyes, letting the warmth soak into her skin. Behind her, the hospital held a Navy SEAL, who would live because of a dog she'd trained years ago. It held veterans like Silas Thompson, who'd served and sacrificed and never asked for recognition. It held staff like Dr. Bennett, who'd fought to save a life even when the situation seemed hopeless. And it held memories. So many memories. "Part of me did die that day," she'd told Commander Davis. And it was true. The woman who had walked into that valley in 2019 was not the woman who had walked out. Something had been left behind in that blood-soaked earth. Innocence, maybe, or certainty, or the belief that hard work and good intentions were enough to keep people alive. But something had survived, too. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The cracked screen lit up, showing a message that had arrived while she was inside. An unknown number. A single line of text. Willow stared at the screen. Her hand was shaking. She looked around the parking lot with a tactical awareness that she'd never truly lost. Most of the cars were empty, their owners inside the hospital. A few people walked to and from their vehicles, absorbed in their own concerns, paying no attention to the small woman in the torn janitor's uniform. But at the far end of the lot, partially hidden by a delivery truck, sat a black SUV with tinted windows. Its engine was off. Its lights were dark. It could have been any vehicle belonging to any visitor, except that Willow had been trained to notice things that didn't fit. And something about that SUV, its position, its stillness, the way it seemed to be waiting rather than parked, triggered instincts she'd spent 6 months trying to suppress. She looked back at her phone, read the message again. Then she typed a single-word response and hit send. The SUV's brake lights flashed briefly, as if in acknowledgement. Willow pocketed her phone and resumed walking toward her apartment. But her pace had changed. Her posture had shifted. The invisible woman who mopped floors and emptied bedpans had been replaced by something else. Something harder, more alert, more dangerous. Somewhere behind her, the SUV's engine turned over. And in the recovery wing of VA Hospital San Diego, Titan lifted his head from his paws and let out a single, mournful howl, as if he knew. The ghost was awake. The walk to her apartment had never felt longer. The black SUV maintained its distance. 2 blocks back, never closer, never farther. Professional, patient. The kind of surveillance that came from training, not instinct. Willow didn't look back, didn't change her pace, didn't give any indication that she'd noticed. But her mind was racing through possibilities, calculating angles, assessing threats. Phoenix. The name echoed through her thoughts like a gunshot in an empty room. Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez had been Phoenix. Willow's second in command. The handler who'd trained Shadow. The black German shepherd who could detect explosives at ranges that seemed almost supernatural. The woman who'd held Willow's hand during the worst moments of her career and told her that everything would be fine. Elena had died in the valley. Willow had seen it happen, had watched the light leave her eyes as the ambush tore through their position. So, who was sending messages from a dead woman's call sign? She reached her apartment building, a nondescript 3-story structure with peeling paint and a front door that stuck in humid weather. Home, or the closest thing to it, she'd allowed herself since leaving everything behind. Her studio apartment was exactly as she'd left it 12 hours ago. Small bed, neatly made, minimal furniture. No decorations except for a single photograph on the nightstand, face down, because she couldn't bear to look at it, but couldn't bring herself to throw it away. The SUV had parked across the street, still silent. Willow pulled the curtain closed and sat on the edge of her bed. The phone in her pocket buzzed. A new message from the unknown number. "We need to talk. You know where." Her fingers hovered over the screen. The rational part of her mind, the part that had survived by being cautious, by staying invisible, by refusing to engage with the past, screamed at her to ignore the message, to block the number, to pretend this had never happened. But another part of her, the part that had never stopped being a soldier, the part that had been asking questions for 3 years without answers, wanted to know, needed to know. She typed, "When?" The response came immediately. "Tonight. 2100 hours. Come alone." Willow stared at the message. Then she set the phone down, lay back on her bed, and closed her eyes. She had 12 hours. 12 hours to decide whether to walk back into a world she'd spent 3 years trying to escape. 12 hours to decide whether the truth was worth the risk. Sleep, when it came, was filled with dreams of fire and blood and the sound of dogs howling in a valley that smelled like death. The knock on her door came at 1400 hours. Willow was awake instantly, her body responding before her mind had fully engaged. She rolled off the bed, landing in a crouch, her eyes scanning the room for anything that could serve as a weapon. Old habits. "Ms. Harper?" The voice was female, professional. "This is Lieutenant Grace Palmer, Naval Intelligence. I'd like to speak with you, if you have a moment." Willow approached the door but didn't open it. "How did you find this address?" "Commander Davis provided it. He said you might be expecting contact from our office." "He said nothing of the kind." A pause. "No, ma'am, he didn't. But he did say you were sharp enough to see through a convenient lie." Another pause. "May I come in? What I have to say shouldn't be discussed in a hallway." Willow considered her options. Then she unlocked the door and stepped back, giving herself space and angle. Lieutenant Palmer was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that missed nothing. She wore civilian clothes, but they hung on her frame like a uniform anyway. Some people couldn't hide what they were, no matter how they dressed. "Thank you," Palmer said, stepping inside. Her gaze swept the apartment in a single efficient motion, cataloging exits, assessing the space, noting the face-down photograph and the mop by the door. "I apologize for the intrusion." "You're not here to apologize." Willow closed the door, but didn't lock it. "What does Naval Intelligence want with a janitor?" Palmer's lips twitched. "We both know you're not a janitor, Master Chief." "Not really. I push a mop, I empty bedpans, I clean floors. That makes me a janitor." "That makes you a janitor who happens to have trained more combat K-9s than anyone in SOCOM history, who holds certifications that don't officially exist, who survived an operation that was never supposed to happen in a place that doesn't appear on any map." Palmer reached into her jacket and produced a folder, thin, unmarked, the kind that usually contained things that would never see a courtroom. "We need to talk about Crimson Kennel." The name hit Willow like a physical blow. She'd spent 3 years trying not to hear it, not to think it, not to remember. And now, twice in one day, it was being thrown at her like a grenade. "That operation is classified." "It is, above your clearance." "Above my clearance, above almost everyone's clearance." Palmer set the folder on the small table by the window. "But someone has been asking questions, someone with enough access to dig into files that were supposed to be buried forever. And 3 weeks ago, that someone started reaching out to the families of the handlers who died." Willow's blood ran cold. "What?" Marcus Chen's widow received an anonymous letter claiming her husband's death wasn't an accident. Elena Vasquez's brother got a phone call from a blocked number, asking questions about her final deployment. David Kowalski's parents were approached by a journalist who knew details about their son that never appeared in any official report. The names cut through Willow like knives. Marcus, Elena, David, her people, her team. The handlers she'd led into that valley and failed to bring home. "Someone is digging," Palmer continued, "and whoever they are, they know enough to be dangerous. The question is, are they trying to expose what happened, or are they trying to cover it up?" "What does this have to do with me?" "You're the only survivor, Master Chief. The only person who knows what really happened in that valley. If someone is trying to rewrite the narrative of Crimson Kennel, you're the key to either confirming or destroying their version." Palmer leaned forward. "What did happen out there?" Willow's jaw tightened. "I gave my after-action report. Everything I knew is in the official record." "The official record is a work of fiction, and we both know it. Intelligence failures don't explain what happened to your team. Equipment malfunctions don't explain why 6 handlers and 6 dogs died while you survived. And enemy action doesn't explain why the bodies were never recovered." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Willow gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "The bodies were recovered," she said. "I was at the memorial service. I watched the flags being folded. You watched empty coffins being buried." Palmer's voice was gentle but relentless. "The valley was deemed too dangerous for recovery operations. The official story is that the remains were left in place as a matter of tactical necessity. But I've seen the satellite imagery, Master Chief. 24 hours after the extraction, that valley was clean. No bodies. No equipment. No evidence that anyone had ever been there. That's impossible. That's classified." Palmer stood. Someone cleaned that site before our recovery team could reach it. Someone removed all evidence of what happened. And now, 3 years later, someone is stirring up questions that should have stayed buried. She moved toward the door, then paused. I'm not here to interrogate you, Master Chief. I'm here to warn you. Whatever is happening, you're at the center of it. The message you received this morning, yes, we know about it, is almost certainly connected. Be careful who you trust, and be careful what questions you ask. She reached for the door handle. Because someone has gone to great lengths to make sure certain answers stay hidden. And they may not appreciate you looking for them. Wait. The word escaped before Willow could stop it. The message used a call sign. Phoenix. That was Elena Vasquez's call sign. She's dead. I watched her die. Palmer's expression flickered. Something that might have been surprise or might have been confirmation. Did you? She asked. Did you actually watch her die, or did you watch her fall? Then Palmer was gone, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving Willow alone with a folder full of secrets and a head full of questions. The folder Palmer had left contained documents that shouldn't exist. Satellite imagery of the valley before and after the operation. Communication intercepts that suggested the ambush had been planned, not improvised. Personnel files on her team members. Files that included details she'd never known, connections she'd never suspected. Elena Vasquez, Phoenix. The woman who'd been Willow's closest friend for 8 years. The handler who'd never talked about her past, who'd deflected personal questions with jokes and subject changes, who'd been brilliant and driven and just secretive enough to be mysterious. According to the file, Elena had spent 2 years assigned to a black site in Eastern Europe before joining the Ghost Handler unit. The nature of her work there was redacted, but the time frame coincided with a series of covert operations that had never been officially acknowledged. Operations that had targeted the same network responsible for the Crimson Kennel ambush. Willow set the file down, her mind racing. What if the ambush hadn't been random? What if her team had been targeted specifically because of Elena's past work? What if the mission had been compromised not by intelligence failure, but by deliberate betrayal? And what if Elena had known? What if she'd suspected? And that's why she'd pushed so hard to be part of the operation. Why she'd insisted on taking point. Why she'd been the first one into the kill zone. The questions spiraled, each one leading to 3 more, until Willow's head was pounding with the weight of possibilities she'd never considered. She looked at the clock. 18:30 hours. 2.5 hours until the meeting. 2.5 hours to decide whether to walk into what might be a trap, chasing answers that might not exist for a woman who might not be dead. She picked up her phone and stared at the message thread. You know where. And suddenly, she did know. There was only one place Elena would have chosen, only one location that held meaning for both of them. The beach at Coronado. The stretch of sand where they'd celebrated graduation from the Handler program, where they'd buried time capsules with their hopes and dreams and the names of their first K-9 partners, where Elena had told Willow, on the night before Crimson Kennel, that she had something important to tell her, something that would change everything, but that it could wait until they got back. Willow made her decision. She showered and changed, trading her janitor's uniform for clothes she hadn't worn in 3 years. Dark tactical pants, boots that were still broken in, a jacket that concealed more than it revealed. She retrieved items from hiding places she'd established when she first moved in, just in case. A knife, a backup phone, enough cash to disappear again if necessary. Then she looked at the photograph on her nightstand, the one she couldn't bear to look at. For the first time in 6 months, she turned it over. 7 faces smiled back at her. 6 handlers and their unit commander. Elena was in the center, her arm around Willow's shoulders, her smile bright and certain. Shadow, her black German shepherd, sat at her feet. Beside them, Marcus Chen held Scout's leash. David Kowalski had his hand on Phantom's head. The others, Jake, Maria, Terrence, were arranged around them, their dogs at their sides. The last photo, taken 12 hours before deployment. What did you know, Elena? Willow whispered to the photograph. What weren't you telling me? She pocketed the photo and headed for the door. Willow approached from the south, keeping to the shadows, her training guiding her movements even after 3 years of domesticity. The tourist areas were behind her now, the crowds thinned to nothing, The only sounds the crash of waves and the distant thrum of helicopter rotors from the Naval Air Station. This stretch of beach had been theirs. The Ghost Handler Unit's unofficial territory, claimed by tradition and protected by reputation. Civilians rarely ventured this far down, and the few who did were quickly discouraged by the intensity of the operators who trained here. But tonight, the beach was empty. A figure stood at the waterline, silhouetted against the moon's reflection on the waves. Small, female, familiar in a way that made Willow's heart stutter. She stopped walking, stood frozen, 50 yards away, unable to move closer, unable to retreat. The figure turned. "Hello, Willow." The voice reached her across the sand and the years and the grief that had never fully healed. A voice she'd heard in dreams and nightmares. A voice she'd convinced herself she'd never hear again. "Elena?" The figure moved toward her, and as it stepped into a patch of moonlight, Willow saw her face. Changed. Older. Scarred. The left side of her face a roadmap of reconstructive surgery and determination. But unmistakably, impossibly, Elena Vasquez. Phoenix. Alive. "I know," Elena said, stopping 10 feet away. "I know what you're thinking. I know what you're feeling. And I know you have every right to be furious with me." Willow's hand moved to the knife at her belt. Not threatening. Not yet. But ready. "You died. I watched you die. You watched me fall. There's a difference." Elena's voice was steady, but her eyes were haunted. "The extraction team that pulled you out? They weren't the only team in that valley. Someone else got to me first. Someone who had very specific reasons for wanting me alive." "Who?" "The same people who set up the ambush. The same people who've been watching you for 3 years, waiting to see if you remembered something, suspected something, figured out that the whole operation was a setup from the beginning." Elena took a breath. "Crimson Kennel wasn't an intelligence failure, Willow. It was an assassination. And we were the targets." The words hit Willow like bullets, each one precise, each one devastating. "The whole team? Why?" "Because of me. Because of what I knew. What I'd seen during my time at the black site." Elena's scarred face twisted with something that might have been guilt. "I found out something I wasn't supposed to find out. About assets, about operations, about money changing hands that shouldn't have been changing hands. I reported it through proper channels, and I thought it was handled. But instead they killed our team to bury what you knew. Yes." The word came out broken. "Marcus, David, Jake, Maria, Terrence, 6 dogs, all of them dead because of me. Because I was naive enough to think that doing the right thing would matter." Willow's grip on the knife tightened. Part of her wanted to use it. Part of her wanted to make Elena feel the pain that she'd been carrying for 3 years. The grief that had hollowed her out. The guilt that had driven her to push a mop in a VA hospital because she couldn't face the world that had taken everything from her. But another part of her, the part that had loved Elena like a sister, saw the devastation in those haunted eyes and recognized it. The same devastation she saw in the mirror every morning. "You let me think you were dead. I had no choice. They were watching you, Willow. Watching all the families. If I'd reached out, if anyone had known I was alive, they would have finished what they started. They would have killed you. And then they would have killed everyone else who might ask questions. So why now? Why contact me after 3 years?" "Because things have changed." Elena reached into her jacket. Willow tensed, but what emerged was not a weapon. It was another folder. "I've been gathering evidence, building a case, identifying the people responsible, and documenting their connections. It took 3 years, but I finally have enough to bring them down." "Bring who down?" Elena extended the folder. "Look for yourself." Willow took it, opened it, and felt the blood drain from her face as she recognized the names. "These are high-ranking officers, intelligence officials, a sitting senator." "A network," Elena confirmed, "operating across multiple agencies, multiple departments, multiple administrations. They've been running unauthorized operations for 15 years, funneling resources to projects that were never approved, eliminating anyone who got too close to the truth." She paused. "Crimson Kennel was supposed to be the final cleanup. My team stumbled onto their financing channels. We had to go. This is insane. This is reality. The reality that got our friends killed." Elena stepped closer. "I need your help, Willow. You're the only witness to what happened in that valley. The only person whose testimony could corroborate the evidence I've gathered, and you're the only person I trust enough to bring into this. You left me alone for 3 years. You let me mourn you. You let me blame myself for not saving you. Willow's voice cracked. Why would I trust you now? Because I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to look at the evidence and decide for yourself. Elena's voice dropped lower. And because there's something else. Something I should have told you before Crimson Kennel. Something I've been carrying since I was pulled out of that valley. What? Elena pulled back her jacket, exposing her left side. There, visible through a gap in her shirt, was a pattern of scarring that Willow recognized instantly. Teeth marks. The distinctive pattern of a Belgian Malinois bite. Shadow didn't die with me, Elena said. He tried to protect me during the extraction, fought the people who were taking me. They shot him, but they didn't kill him. He's been with me ever since, alive, waiting. Willow's composure shattered. Shadow. Elena's K9. The dog that Willow had trained from puppyhood, had watched bond with his handler, had mourned as dead, along with all the others. Alive. Where is he? Elena whistled, a low, specific tone that Willow remembered teaching her years ago. From the shadows behind the dunes, a dark shape emerged. Older now, gray around the muzzle, moving with a slight limp that spoke of old injuries that had never fully healed, but unmistakably, impossibly alive. Shadow. He approached slowly, his eyes fixed on Willow with an intensity that transcended the 3 years of separation. His nose twitched, sampling her scent, confirming what his eyes were telling him. Then his tail began to wag, slowly at first, then faster. And when Willow dropped to her knees on the sand, Shadow bounded forward and pressed his head against her chest, whining softly, his entire body vibrating with reunion. Hey, boy, Willow whispered, her voice breaking completely. Hey, boy, I thought I'd lost you. I thought I'd lost all of you. Elena knelt beside them, one hand on Shadow's back, the other reaching for Willow's shoulder. Not all of us, not completely. Her voice was thick with emotion. I'm sorry, Willow. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you, for the grief, for the loneliness. If there had been any other way, there's always another way. Not this time, not against these people. Elena's hand tightened on Willow's shoulder, but now we have a chance, a real chance. With the evidence I've gathered and your testimony, we can expose what they did. We can get justice for Marcus and David and Jake and Maria and Terrence. We can make their deaths mean something. Willow looked up at the woman she'd thought was dead, at the scars that mapped a journey of survival and secrets, at the determination in those haunted eyes. And then what? We expose them, and then what? They disappear? They go to prison? Their careers are over? Then they can't hurt anyone else. Then no other unit gets ambushed. No other handlers die to protect someone's dirty secrets. Elena's voice hardened. Then we win. Shadow pressed closer, his warmth a comfort that Willow had forgotten she needed. Who else knows you're alive? A few people. Ones I trust. They've been helping me gather evidence, stay hidden, stay alive. Elena paused. Lieutenant Palmer is one of them. Palmer, Naval Intelligence? She's been tracking this network for 5 years. When I surfaced with my evidence, she was the only one I could approach safely. She's the reason I was able to reach out to you without alerting the people who are still watching. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that Willow didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. The SUV outside the hospital, the one that followed me home, Palmer's people, watching you, protecting you, making sure the network didn't get to you first. And the message, the text that led me here, also Palmer, using my call sign because she knew it was the only thing that would get your attention. Elena's expression softened. I'm sorry for the manipulation, but I needed you to come here without alerting anyone who might be watching through conventional channels. Willow stood, shadow rising with her, pressing against her leg as if afraid she might disappear again. You're asking me to trust people I've never met, on the word of a woman who let me think she was dead for 3 years. You're asking me to believe that everything I thought I knew about Crimson Kennel was a lie. Yes. And what if I say no? What if I walk away right now, go back to my apartment and never speak of this again? Elena's face fell, but her voice remained steady. Then I'll disappear again, take shadow and go underground, continue the fight alone, the way I have been for 3 years. And eventually, I'll either succeed or I'll die trying. But I won't force you to be part of this. You've suffered enough because of me. Willow Harper, Master Chief Petty Officer, call sign Wraith, faced a choice she'd never expected to have to make. She thought about the VA hospital and the veterans she cleaned for, about Silas Thompson and his knowing eyes, about Caleb Warren, who was alive because of a dog she'd trained, about Titan, waiting patiently by his handler's bedside. She thought about her team, Marcus, David, Jake, Maria, Terrence, and the memorial service she'd attended with empty coffins and folded flags. She thought about 3 years of pushing a mop and emptying bedpans, trying to find peace in invisibility, trying to outrun the ghosts that haunted every moment of every day. And she realized that peace had never been an option. Not really, not for someone like her. The only question was what she was going to do about it. I have conditions, she said finally. Elena's eyes lit up with hope. Name them. First, no more secrets. Everything you know, everything Palmer knows, everything anyone involved in this knows, I want access to all of it. I spent 3 years in the dark. That ends now. Done. Second, when this is over, when the network is exposed and the people responsible are facing justice, I walk away. No recruitment pitches, no appeals to duty, no guilt trips about what the unit needs or what my country expects. I'm done with that life. This is a one-time thing. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Done. Third, Willow's voice hardened. If at any point I discover you've lied to me, about anything, no matter how small, I disappear, and you never find me again. Understood? Understood. Willow looked down at Shadow, who was still pressed against her leg, his tail wagging slowly. I can't believe you're alive, boy, she murmured. I can't believe any of this. Shadow's tail wagged faster. So, Elena extended her hand. Partners, one last time? Willow looked at the scarred hand, at the woman she'd mourned, at the dog she'd trained. Then she reached out and gripped Elena's hand firmly. Partners, one last time. The safe house was a nondescript structure in a neighborhood that specialized in anonymity, the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one remembered faces. Lieutenant Palmer was waiting inside, along with 2 other operatives who were introduced only by call signs. Master Chief Harper. Palmer's greeting was professional but warm. Thank you for coming. You didn't leave me much choice. No, but I'm still grateful. Palmer gestured to a table covered with documents, photographs, and electronic equipment. We have a lot to discuss and not much time. The network knows something is happening. They may not know what yet, but they're getting nervous. We have perhaps 72 hours before they start taking drastic measures to protect themselves. Drastic measures meaning what? Meaning people start dying. Witnesses, sources, anyone who might be able to testify to what they've done. Palmer's voice was grim. Including you, Master Chief. As of tonight, you've moved from person of interest to active threat. They'll be looking for you. Let them look. Palmer smiled slightly. I was hoping you'd say that. The briefing took 4 hours. By the end of it, Willow's head was swimming with names and connections and operations that spanned 2 decades of covert activity. The network was larger than she'd imagined, a hydra with tendrils reaching into every agency, every department, every corner of the national security apparatus. At its center were 3 individuals, a 2-star general who'd been laundering money through defense contracts, an intelligence official who'd been running unauthorized operations for personal profit, and a senator who'd been providing political cover in exchange for favors and funding. 3 people, 3 targets, 3 pillars that, if removed, would bring the entire structure crashing down. The evidence is solid, Palmer concluded. Testimony from former operatives, financial records tracing the money, communication intercepts proving coordination. With your eyewitness account of Crimson Kennel and Elena's corroboration, we have enough to take this to the Attorney General. Then why haven't you? Because the Attorney General's Chief of Staff is connected to the network. We can't go through normal channels. They'd be warned before we could act. We need to go public, media, Congress, multiple simultaneous exposures that they can't contain or suppress. And you need me for that. Your testimony is crucial. You're a decorated veteran with an impeccable service record. When you tell the world what happened to your team, people will listen. and when they listen, the pressure becomes impossible to resist. Willow considered the plan, the risks, the potential consequences. And if they come after me before we can go public, that's what we're here to prevent. Palmer gestured to the operatives in the room. You'll have protection, safe houses, multiple extraction routes. We've been preparing for this for years. What about the hospital? The veterans I've been taking care of? Elena stepped forward. Commander Davis has been briefed, partially. He knows you may need to be absent for a while. He's arranged for your duties to be covered. And Titan, Caleb Warren. Warren is recovering well. Titan is with him. They'll be fine. Willow nodded slowly. The pieces were in place. The plan was solid. The people involved seemed competent and trustworthy. But something still bothered her. One question. Ask. The valley after Crimson Kennel. Palmer said the site was cleaned before our recovery team could reach it. Bodies removed, equipment erased, no evidence left behind. Willow's eyes were fixed on Elena. Who did that? And why? The room went quiet. Elena exchanged a glance with Palmer. Something passed between them. Information, calculation, decision. The network, Elena said finally. They sent a team to erase the evidence, to make sure there was nothing left that could contradict their version of events. But they took you, kept you alive. They thought I might know things they needed, information I'd gathered during my time at the Black Site, names, locations, details of operations they wanted to keep hidden. And the others? Marcus, David, Jake, Maria, Terrence. Elena's face contorted with pain. They weren't as useful. The implications settled over the room like a shroud. They killed them after the ambush. They killed them to make sure there were no survivors who could talk. Yes. And the dogs? Elena's eyes glistened. Ranger, Phantom, Ghost, Hunter, they fought. They protected their handlers to the end. The network team had to kill them to get to the bodies. Willow's hands clenched into fists. The rage that had been simmering beneath her grief for 3 years finally had a target. Not random misfortune, not the fog of war, but deliberate, calculated murder by people who wore the same uniform and swore the same oath. When do we start? Palmer smiled grimly. We already have. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation and movement. Willow recorded her testimony in a secure location, speaking for 6 hours into cameras that captured every word, every detail, every moment of horror from that valley. She described the ambush, the deaths of her teammates, her escape. She identified inconsistencies in the official story. She provided context for the evidence that Elena and Palmer had gathered. When she was done, she felt emptied out, hollowed, like she'd expelled something toxic that had been poisoning her for years. Elena recorded her own testimony next. The years at the Black Site, the discovery of the network's activities, the decision to report through official channels, the realization, too late, that she'd signed her team's death warrant. Together, their accounts formed an unassailable narrative. 2 highly decorated special operations veterans, one thought dead, both telling the same story, corroborating the same evidence. The media package was assembled with precision, copies distributed to 17 different news organizations simultaneously. Congressional offices notified through secure channels. The Attorney General's office alerted through a back door that bypassed the compromised chief of staff. And then they waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By noon the next day, the story was on every major news network. By evening, congressional hearings had been announced. By midnight, the 3 principals of the network, the general, the intelligence official, the senator, had been placed under house arrest pending investigation. Willow watched it unfold from a safe house in Virginia. Shadow pressed against her leg, Elena sitting in a chair beside her. It's done, Elena said quietly. It's actually done. Not quite. Willow's eyes were fixed on the screen, where talking heads debated the implications of the revelations. The hearings will take months. The trials will take years. These people have resources, connections, lawyers. This isn't over until they're actually behind bars. But it's started. For the first time in 3 years, it's actually started. Shadow whined softly, sensing the tension in the room. Willow reached down and scratched behind his ears. Yeah, boy, it started. Her phone buzzed. A message from Commander Davis. Watching the news. Proud of you, Master Chief. Your room at the hospital will be waiting when you're ready to come back, but take your time. You've earned it." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Thank you, sir. I'll be home soon." Home. The word felt strange, but not wrong. She looked at Elena, at Shadow, at the screens filled with news of justice finally being pursued. "What happens now? To you?" Elena shrugged. "Witness protection, probably. New identity, new life. There are still people out there who'd rather see me dead than testifying. And after? When the trials are over? I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." Elena paused. "I spent 3 years focused on one thing, exposing what they did. Now that it's happening, I'm not sure what comes next. Maybe nothing needs to come next. Maybe you just live. Is that what you're going to do? Just live?" Willow considered the question. The apartment with the face-down photograph, the mop and bucket by the door, the veterans she cleaned for, and the hospital that had become her sanctuary. "I think so, at least for now. There's a SEAL in San Diego who needs his dog back. There's a floor that needs mopping. There are people who need someone to care about the small things." She looked at Shadow. "And apparently there's a retired K9 who needs a place to spend his golden years." Elena's eyebrows rose. "You want to take Shadow? He's been with you for 3 years, but you're going into protection, new identity. That's no life for a dog." Willow met Elena's eyes. "He deserves peace, a yard, someone who knows what he's been through. I can give him that." Elena was silent for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand on Shadow's head. "He saved my life 100 times, she said softly. "In that valley, in the years after. He's the reason I'm still here. Then let me take care of him. Let me give him the retirement he's earned." Tears were streaming down Elena's scarred face now, but she nodded. "Take care of him, Willow. Take care of yourself." She pulled Willow into a fierce embrace. "Thank you for believing me, for helping me finish this, for being the sister I never had. Thank you for not being dead." Elena laughed, a broken, tear-soaked sound. "That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." They held each other for a long moment. Two survivors. Two ghosts who'd finally found their way back to the light. Then Willow pulled back, wiped her eyes, and looked at Shadow. "Come on, boy. Let's go home." The VA Hospital San Diego felt different now. Willow pushed her mop down the familiar corridors, Shadow padding beside her on quiet pause. It was her first shift back after 2 weeks of absence, 2 weeks of testimony and protection, and a media firestorm that had consumed the nation. The network was crumbling. The general had resigned and was awaiting trial. The intelligence official had been arrested. The senator had died by apparent suicide, though few believed it was voluntary. And across the country, other figures connected to their activities were scrambling to distance themselves, cut deals, save their own skins. And Willow Harper was back to mopping floors. "Master Chief!" She turned. Master Sergeant Silas Thompson was wheeling toward her, a grin splitting his weathered face. "Mr. Thompson, how are you feeling?" "Better than I have in years. Amazing what a little national news coverage can do for a veteran's spirits." He reached down to pet Shadow, who accepted the attention with dignified grace. "I see you brought a friend. This is Shadow. He's retired, like you. We're keeping each other company. Good dog." Thompson's eyes were knowing. "Good handler, too." "I'm not a handler anymore. I'm a janitor." "Sure you are." Thompson's grin widened. "The most famous janitor in America." Willow sighed. The coverage had been extensive. Her photograph had appeared on every major network. Her service record had been dissected by talking heads who'd never served a day in uniform. Her testimony had been quoted, analyzed, debated by people who would never understand what that valley had cost her. She was no longer invisible, and part of her mourned the loss. But another part, a smaller part, growing slowly, was beginning to see the value in being seen. "Master Chief Harper?" She turned to find a teenage boy approaching, awkward in the way of adolescence, his eyes wide with something that might have been awe. "Yes? I'm Jason Chen. My dad was Marcus Chen." Marcus, the first handler she'd trained, the one who'd taught her that dogs could sense fear and sadness and hope, the one who died in that valley because she hadn't been good enough, fast enough, strong enough to save him. Willow's voice failed her. "I just wanted to say thank you." Jason's eyes were glistening. "My mom and I watched your testimony. We finally know what happened to him. We finally know the truth. And we know he died protecting his team. That he was a hero. He was the best of us," Willow managed. "The very best. He talked about you before he deployed. He said his unit commander was the strongest person he'd ever met. That if anything happened, we shouldn't worry, because Wraith would take care of everything." The boy's voice cracked. "He believed in you." Willow's composure shattered. The tears she'd held back for 3 years finally broke free, streaming down her face as the boy embraced her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I couldn't bring him home. You brought him justice. That's enough." Jason pulled back, wiping his own eyes. "That's more than enough." They stood there for a long moment, the handler who'd survived and the son of the handler who hadn't. The weight of grief and gratitude and something that might have been healing passing between them. Then Jason turned and walked away, leaving Willow alone with her mop and her dog and her tears. "Master Chief?" Thompson's voice was gentle. "You okay?" Willow wiped her face, steadied her breathing, looked down at Shadow, who was watching her with understanding in his amber eyes. "Yeah," she said finally. "I think I'm going to be." She found Caleb Warren's room without difficulty. Through the window, she could see Titan lying at the foot of the bed, his massive head resting on his paws. Caleb was awake, propped up on pillows, his hand reaching down to scratch behind his dog's ears. Shadow whined softly. Willow pushed open the door. Titan's head came up instantly, his body tensing, then relaxing as he recognized the woman entering the room. His tail thumped against the bedding. "Master Chief Harper!" Caleb's voice was weak but warm. "Commander Davis told me what you did, what you've been doing all along. I trained Titan, that's all." "That's not all, and we both know it." Caleb struggled to sit up straighter. "That night in the emergency bay, I was dreaming, floating in and out. But I heard your voice, heard you talking to Titan, heard you—" He trailed off, emotion overwhelming him. "Heard me what?" "Heard you calling him by his training name, the one nobody else knows, the one that got recorded on his service file, and then classified above everyone's clearance." Caleb's eyes were wet. "You didn't just train him, Master Chief. You raised him. He's the reason I'm alive, and you're the reason he exists." Willow approached the bed, Shadow staying close to her side. She looked down at Titan, at the dog she'd raised from puppyhood, and felt the weight of all those years. The training, the letting go, the grief of believing he was just another soldier she'd failed. "He's a good dog," she said simply. "The best." Caleb's hand continued to stroke Titan's fur. "They're sending me back to Coronado for recovery. 6 months of physical therapy, minimum. But they said—" He hesitated. "They said Titan can stay with me, that the bond between a handler and his K9 is too important to break, even for medical reasons. They're right. Will you visit when I'm in recovery?" Caleb's voice was almost shy. "Titan would like that. He remembers you." Willow looked at the Belgian Malinois, at the intelligence in those amber eyes, at the connection that transcended training and time and all the distance between them. "Yes," she said. "I'll visit." Titan's tail thumped harder. Shadow moved forward, approaching the bed with the careful dignity of an elder statesman meeting a younger colleague. The two dogs regarded each other, the black German shepherd and the tan Malinois, and something passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the shared experience of service and sacrifice. Then Shadow lay down beside the bed, settling into position as if he'd always belonged there. Willow smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. "I think he likes it here. There's room for both of them," Caleb said, "and for you, any time." She looked around the room, the hospital equipment, the military efficiency, the two dogs resting peacefully in the presence of the people who understood them. "Thank you, Chief Petty Officer Warren." "Thank you, Caleb." She turned to leave, Shadow rising to follow her. But at the door, she paused. "The dogs," she said without turning around. "They remember everything. The training, the missions, the people who raised them. Years from now, decades from now, Titan will still remember you. That bond doesn't break. It doesn't fade. It just becomes part of who you both are. Is that what it's like for you? With the dogs you've trained?" Willow thought of Scout, who'd died in her arms, of Shadow, who'd survived against all odds, of the dozens of K9s she'd raised and released and never stopped caring about. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what it's like." Then she walked out into the corridor, Shadow at her side, leaving behind a seal and his dog and the quiet understanding that some connections were forever. The hospital was winding down for the night. The emergency bay was clean now, no trace of the chaos that had erupted there weeks ago. "Master Chief." She turned. Commander Davis was approaching, his uniform crisp even at this late hour. "Commander, I didn't know you were here. Just checking on Warren and on you." He stopped beside her, looking through the window at the empty bay. "Hell of a month. That's one word for it. The network is done. The trials are proceeding. Your testimony is being called the most compelling first-hand account of military corruption in modern history." He paused. "SOCOM is very proud of you." Davis reached into his pocket and produced a familiar bronze disc. "You left this behind, the challenge coin, Ghost Unit 7. Willow looked at the coin but didn't take it. "I told you I was done with that life. And you are. But this isn't about recruitment. It's about recognition." He pressed the coin into her hand. "Whatever you do next, wherever you go, you earn this. You earn the right to carry it." "I'm staying," she said quietly. "At the hospital, in my apartment, with my mop and my bucket and my very good boy." "I figured as much." Davis smiled. "The offer stands, though, if you ever change your mind." The sunrise found Willow on the roof of the VA hospital, Shadow lying beside her. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She looked at the message. The network had partners, outside the country. They're asking questions. Be careful. A friend? She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who owes you a debt. Someone who's been watching. Someone who will reach out again when the time is right. Until then, watch your back, Wraith. The ghosts aren't finished yet." The message ended there. No further responses, no identification. The network had partners, outside the country, still operating, still dangerous. Elena was in witness protection. The trials were proceeding, justice was being done. But somewhere out there, in the shadows of international intelligence, more enemies were stirring, more threats were emerging. She scratched behind Shadow's ears. "What do you think, boy? Ready for one more adventure?" Shadow's tail thumped against the roof. "Yeah." Willow smiled, a real smile, one that reached her eyes for the first time in years. "Me neither, but I guess we'll find out together." And as the sun rose over Via Hospital San Diego, painting the world in shades of hope and possibility, Willow Harper, Master Chief Petty Officer, picked up her mop and got back to work. Shadow padded beside her, and somewhere in the distance, across miles and years and all the grief they'd shared, she could have sworn she heard the echo of dogs howling,